Under the blazing Nevada sun, a homeless boy named Eli saved a biker's daughter from a burning car, only to vanish into the desert hours later, accused of the very crime he tried to prevent. Now hunted by the same gang he risked his life for, Eli stumbles upon a secret buried beneath the sand, a secret powerful enough to kill four. The engines are roaring, and the desert's closing in. What started as a rescue is turning into a nightmare he can't escape. Welcome to Echo Tales. A place where stories come straight from the pavement, the pain, and the quiet moments of hope that carry people through hard times. As you listen, may God guard you, renew your strength, and remind you that even the deepest darkness can't stop the light. If you're here, don't rush past, subscribe, like, and leave a comment so you can walk with us as new stories unfold. Now, settle in and let's enjoy the story together. The desert sun was merciless, hanging over Highway 95 like a white-hot eye that never blinked. Heat shimmered off the cracked asphalt, turning the road into a wavering mirage that seemed to stretch forever. Eli Parker, 17 and exhausted to the bone, walked the shoulder with a torn backpack on one shoulder and cracked boots that complained with every step. The air tasted like dust and old metal. He had left Los Angeles behind days ago, trading the noise of sirens and traffic for the hollow quiet of the Mojave. Out here, there were no bridges to sleep under, no shelter doors slamming in his face, no caseworkers promising things they never delivered. Just sky, sand, and the steady rhythm of his own footsteps. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like the world had forgotten he existed. He stopped to retie a fraying bootlace, fingers clumsy from heat and hunger. As he straightened, a silver Mustang appeared in the distance, cutting over a rise and hurtling down the highway far too fast for the warped road. For a second, it looked almost graceful, a streak of polished metal gliding through the desert. Then everything went wrong. The car swerved. Tires screamed. The Mustang fishtailed, skidded sideways, and flew off the road in a spray of dust. It crashed nose-first into the sand, flipped once, and came to rest twisted and broken at the base of a small embankment. Eli dropped his bag and ran. Smoke billowed from under the hood, dark and thick, carrying the sharp sting of gasoline. The windshield was fractured into a spiderweb of glass, the driver slumped against an exploded airbag. A girl, maybe around his age. Blood streaked her forehead and soaked into her hair. "Hey! Hey, wake up!" Eli shouted, banging on the driver's side door. The metal was hot enough to burn. The handle refused to move. He tried again, then stepped back as orange flames flickered out from under the hood and began to climb. Heat rolled off the car in waves that scorched his throat with every breath. Think. Move. Do something. He scanned the ground, grabbed a length of bent metal from the sand, and jammed it into the door frame. Every muscle in his arms screamed as he pried. The door shrieked in protest, then shifted just enough. Eli threw his shoulder into it, forcing it open. He reached in, unbuckled the girl with shaking hands, and pulled. She was heavier than she looked, her limbs limp, her head lolling against his chest. Step by step, he dragged her away from the wreck, boots slipping in the sand. They had barely cleared 10 yards when the Mustang exploded. The blast hit him like a wall, knocking him to his knees. Fire roared into the sky, showering them with bits of glass and twisted metal. Eli curled over the girl, shielding her as best he could while the heat washed over his back. When the roar faded into crackling flames, he lifted his head. The girl coughed, eyes flickering open. Hazel, dazed, unfocused. Who are you?" she rasped. "Eli," he said, still out of breath. You crashed. I pulled you out. She stared at him like she was trying to line up the pieces of a memory. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something else, but another sound rushed in before she could. Engines. Multiple. Deep, rolling, and angry. Eli looked up. Motorcycles were coming fast down the highway, a group of them, throwing dust into the air as they swerved off the asphalt and onto the sand. Within seconds, a circle of bikes formed around them, engines rumbling like caged thunder. The riders all wore black vests with the same patch on the back. A grinning skull wrapped in barbed wire and the words Rogue Souls MC. One of the riders killed his engine and swung off his bike. He was older than the rest, built thick through the shoulders, beard shot through with gray, arms covered in ink. His eyes went first to the girl, and for a brief moment, something like fear cut through his hard expression. "Amber," he said, voice rough. "Talk to me. You breathing?" The girl swallowed, wincing. "Yeah, Dad. I'm breathing. Dad." The man's gaze shifted to Eli with a sharpness that felt like a blade. "And you," he said. "Who the hell are you?" Eli pushed himself up slowly, hands slightly raised, palms empty. "I was walking by. She lost control. I pulled her out before the car blew." The engines idled around them, a low, constant growl. Several of the bikers stared at Eli with open suspicion, eyes flicking from his torn clothes to the burning wreck behind him. The older man stepped closer until his shadow fell across Eli. "Name's Clayton Steele," he said. "People around here call me Steele. This club." He jerked his chin at the bikes surrounding them. "This is my family." Amber's voice came out strained but steady. "Dad, he saved me. I'd still be in that car if it wasn't for him." Steele didn't look at her. He kept his attention locked on Eli, measuring him. Sweat trickled down Eli's neck, but he didn't look away. After a long, tense silence, Steele finally spoke. "You look like you don't belong to anyone," he said. "No patch. No truck. Just a busted pair of boots and a death wish." Eli shrugged faintly. "Just passing through." Steele's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "You've got guts, kid. Maybe that's stupid. Maybe that's useful. Either way, you bought yourself something today." He turned and signaled to one of the men. "Rex. He rides with you. We're taking him back to the compound." A few of the bikers glanced at each other, surprised, but no one argued. Amber looked at Eli, then gave the smallest nod, as if to say she trusted him, even if no one else did. Eli hesitated for a second, then climbed onto the back of Rex's bike. As they pulled away from the burning wreck and back onto the open desert, a thought sank into his gut like a stone. He had just stepped into someone else's world. And worlds like this did not let go easily. The Rogue Souls compound sat hidden behind a jagged ridge outside Barstow, patched together from shipping containers, rusted trailers, and scrap metal fences. Oil drums burned with open flames, casting an orange glow over rows of parked bikes. The air was thick with gasoline, smoke, and voices, shouts, laughter, music sneaking through from a cheap speaker somewhere. Eli climbed off the bike, legs shaky. This place felt alive in a way that cities never had, loud, dangerous, coiled. Men in leather vests moved between fires, carrying tools, bottles, and crates. Some nodded at Amber as she passed. Others stared at Eli like they were already trying to decide whether he was a threat or a joke. Steele guided Amber toward a makeshift infirmary inside one of the trailers. A woman with tired eyes and steady hands started cleaning the cut on her head. Eli lingered near the door until Steele's voice cut through the noise again. "Food's over there," he said, pointing toward a table loaded with paper plates, bread, and whatever had been thrown into a giant pot. "You eat. You don't touch anything that isn't yours. You don't wander where you're not invited. You step out of line, and this gets real unfriendly, real fast." Eli nodded. "Got it." He took a plate and sat near one of the smaller fires, away from the loudest voices. The first bite of hot food made his chest ache. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had anything that hadn't come out of a vending machine or a donation line. After a while, Amber stepped out of the trailer, a bandage wrapped around her forehead, her hair pulled back. She spotted him and walked over, wrapping her arms around a leather jacket against the rising night chill. "Looks better than being on the side of the road," she said, nodding toward his plate. "Yeah," Eli replied. "Beats walking." She sat down across from him, the firelight softening the edges of her face. "So what's your story, highway boy?" Eli poked at his food with the plastic fork. "No story. Just needed to get away from where I was." "Which was?" "Places that didn't want me," he said simply. Something in her expression shifted, like she recognized that feeling. "Well," she said, "you saved the president's daughter. That's not nothing around here." "Doesn't feel like everybody's celebrating," Eli said, glancing at the men still watching him from the shadows. "Trust isn't exactly a hobby in this club," Amber replied. "But you're breathing. That's already more than most strangers get." Night settled deeper over the compound. The fires grew brighter as the sky went darker. Someone turned the music up. Laughter spiked as bottles clinked. But beneath the noise, Eli could feel something else. An undercurrent of tension, like a wire stretched too tight. Hours later, when most of the shouting had faded into low murmurs and snores, Eli lay on an old mattress shoved against a stack of tires, staring at the metal roof above him. Sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Mustang exploding, the black circle of Steele's eyes on him, Amber's voice saying his name. He got up quietly and stepped outside. The night air was cooler, carrying the dry smell of sand and engine oil. He wandered toward the back of the compound, where the fires didn't reach, drawn by the faint murmur of voices. He stopped when he heard Steele. "Shipment goes out at dawn," Steele was saying, his voice low and edged. "We load it, we move it, no mistakes this time." Another voice, Rex. "You sure the feds aren't sniffing around this one?" "They got their cut," Steele replied. "They look the other way, we do our part. Nobody wants this stuff sitting out here any longer than it has to." Eli's skin prickled. "Shipment. Feds. Cut." Rex paused. "And Amber?" Steele's silence stretched long enough for Eli to feel it. "She doesn't need to know what's in those crates," Steele said at last. "And she's not going to." Eli stepped back, heart pounding. His heel crunched over a stray bolt in the dirt. The voices stopped. A shaft of light knifed across the ground as someone swung a flashlight around. Eli pressed himself behind a stack of tires, holding his breath while the beam sliced through the dark, then moved on. When the footsteps faded, he slipped away, keeping low, and headed toward the sleeping area. Amber's tent was lit from inside by a small lantern. "Amber," he whispered, peeking through the flap. The cot was empty. The lantern sat on the floor, nearly out of fuel. Her helmet was gone. Her leather jacket was gone. So was the small radio he'd seen clipped near her bed earlier. A cold weight settled in Eli's chest. He turned and ran for the main yard. One of the bikes was missing from the line near the gate. Fresh tire tracks carved a path through the sand, heading out toward the open desert. He didn't think. He just moved. Eli sprinted to Steele's trailer and hammered on the door. Steele yanked it open, eyes hard and ready for a fight. "You better have a good reason for banging on my door at this hour." "Amber's gone," Eli said, breathing hard. "Her tent's empty. Her bike's gone. She left with her radio." For a fraction of a second, something like fear flashed in Steele's eyes. Then it iced over into suspicion. "You think I'm stupid?" he growled. "You show up out of nowhere, you hear things you shouldn't, and now my daughter's missing." "I just told you what I saw," Eli said. "I don't know where she is." Steele's hand shot out, gripping Eli's shirt and slamming him against the trailer wall. "If you touched her," he said, voice low and lethal, "if you so much as pointed her toward trouble, I'll bury you out here where no one will ever find you." Two bikers appeared behind him, drawn by the noise. One held a chain, thick and rusted. The other rested his hand near the grip of a pistol. "Chain him up," Steele ordered. "We'll see what comes out of his mouth when the sun's up." They dragged Eli across the yard and wrapped the chain around his wrist, locking it to a post welded into a concrete block near the fire pit. The metal bit into his skin when he struggled. The men who had watched him with curiosity earlier now avoided his gaze, their faces closed. Eli sank to the ground, chest tight, dust sticking to the sweat on his arms. He stared out at the open gate, at the tracks leading into darkness. Somewhere out there, Amber was alone. Or worse, not alone at all. The night crawled by, the fires dying down to low embers. Coyotes cried in the distance. The compound dozed in uneasy sleep. Eli's eyes burned, but he couldn't force them shut. Just before dawn, he noticed a faint glow on the distant ridge. Headlights. A vehicle eased into view, silhouetted against the paling sky. Not bikes. 4 wheels. Tall profile. It rolled to a stop overlooking the compound, engine idling. No one else seemed to notice. Eli squinted. The shape was boxy, dark. An SUV. No visible markings from this distance. It lingered there, unmoving, like it was watching. Then, just as slowly, it backed away, disappearing behind the rocks. A chill ran through Eli, cold even in the rising heat. Whatever that was, it hadn't been lost. It had been looking. As the first light of morning spilled over the sand, something small and dark caught his eye just beyond the fence line. Near a clump of scrub, half buried in the dirt. He leaned forward, straining against the chain. Leather. Amber's jacket lay twisted in the sand, one sleeve torn, band of familiar stitching visible along the back. The wind tugged at the fabric, making it flutter weakly. Eli's throat closed. Amber. Boots crunched on the ground behind him. "You see something?" Steele's voice came, low and dangerous. Eli didn't turn. "Her jacket," he said hoarsely. "Out there." Steele stepped closer, following his gaze. His face tightened when he saw it. For a moment, the hardness cracked, replaced by something raw and sharp. Then it vanished. He moved around to stand in front of Eli. "You better have a damn good explanation, boy." "There is no explanation," Eli said, meeting his eyes. Someone out there has her. And they were close enough to throw her jacket at your doorstep. Steele's jaw locked. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The compound slowly stirred behind them, engines coughing to life, voices rising. Somewhere out beyond the ridge, in the direction the SUV had gone, the desert stretched on in endless waves of sand and stone. It felt less like a landscape and more like a mouth, waiting to swallow whatever wandered too far from safety. Eli felt the chain around his wrist, the ache in his ribs, the weight of Steele's stare. Somewhere out there, Amber's trail was cooling with every minute that passed. Somewhere out there, someone had just declared war without saying a word. And chained to a post in the middle of a waking biker compound, Eli Parker understood one thing with absolute, terrifying clarity: whatever had started on Highway 95 wasn't an accident. It was the opening move. Eli's wrist burned where the chain bit into his skin. The sun had barely cleared the horizon, but already the heat pressed down on the Rogue Soul's compound like a hand trying to smother everything beneath it. Dust floated in the air, glowing pale gold as engines rumbled to life one by one, the sound rising like a storm being born. Steele stood in front of him, pistol loose in his hand, eyes locked on Eli's like he was looking at a problem he was deciding how to solve. Beyond the fence, Amber's leather jacket fluttered in the light breeze, half buried in the sand. It didn't look dropped. It looked discarded. Torn at the shoulder. The sight twisted Eli's stomach into a knot he couldn't untangle. Amber, the only person in this place who had treated him like something more than a stray dog, was gone. And somehow, everyone had decided that had to be his fault. If stories like this grip you, hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next twist. I told you, Eli said, forcing the words out past a dry throat. I woke up and she was already gone. I don't know what happened to her. Steele stepped closer, the gravel crunching under his boots. You really expect me to believe a kid like you just wanders onto Highway 95 at the exact second my daughter crashes, then she disappears the same night you hear things you shouldn't? I heard you, Eli shot back, anger cutting through his fear. Talking about shipments. Crates. Feds. You're hiding something, but it's not me. The pistol came up fast, the barrel locking on Eli's face. His pulse roared in his ears. For a second, he saw nothing but the black circle at the end of that gun. Steele's jaw clenched. His finger twitched, then a voice cut through the tension. Boss! Rex shouted from near the fence. You need to see this. Steele held Eli's gaze for one more long second, then lowered the gun and walked away with a curse under his breath. Two bikers stayed behind, eyes cold, hands resting near their belts. Eli didn't move, didn't breathe, listening to Steele's footsteps fade and the wind whip sand against his skin. Rex and another biker stood by the fence line, pointing toward the ridge where the SUV had been. Tracks cut through the sand, deep and clean, not from bikes. From something heavier. Steele knelt, running his hand over the marks. That's not ours, he muttered. Nope, Rex agreed. But whoever it is has been watching us. Maybe longer than last night. Eli strained against the chain, trying to hear more. A faint ringing started in his ears. The memory of that explosion, Amber coughing in the dust, her saying his name. He had seen that black SUV too. Whoever they weren't just passing through. Steele straightened, his voice harder than the dry ground beneath them. Listen up, he shouted. Engines died down one by one, conversations silencing across the compound. Amber's missing. Someone out there thinks they can touch my family and live. That doesn't happen. A low growl rolled through the men. We ride out, we find her, Steele continued. We follow every track, shake every rock. And we start, he turned, pointing straight at Eli, by squeezing the truth out of the only stranger who showed up right before she vanished. The biker's eyes all turned toward Eli at once. It felt like standing in the middle of a ring of wolves, waiting to see who would strike first. Two men approached, Rex, tall and broad, and Miles, lean with a scar across his cheek. Rex unlocked the chain from the post but kept it tight around Eli's wrist like a leash. Move, Rex said. Boss wants words before we hit the desert. They dragged Eli toward an old corrugated metal shed near the edge of the compound. The inside was dim, the air thick with oil, gasoline, and the faint metallic sting of blood that had dried long ago. Tools hung from hooks' walls. A rusting workbench sat under a single dangling light bulb, its pull chain swaying as they let the door slam shut behind them. Rex shoved Eli onto a metal chair. The chain clanged as it wrapped around the back. Miles tightened it more than necessary, making sure every twitch of Eli's arm hurt. Look, I don't know where she is, Eli said, chest rising and falling like he'd sprinted a mile. I heard you last night. I heard Steele talking about the shipment. That's it. I didn't follow her. I didn't touch her. Miles leaned down so close Eli could smell the stale coffee on his breath. You know what I hate, kid? I hate liars. I hate people who walk into other people's homes and turn everything upside down. This isn't a home, Eli snapped. It's a cage made of engines and secrets. Miles' fist slammed into Eli's ribs before the last word finished. Pain exploded in his side, white and hot. Eli bit back a cry, sucking in air through his teeth. Easy, Rex muttered, though there wasn't much real concern in his voice. Boss wants him breathing. Fine, Miles said, wiping his knuckles on his jeans. Then he'd better start saying something useful. The door creaked open. Steele stepped inside, closing it behind him. The light bulb swayed again, throwing shadows across his face. His pistol was holstered now, but that didn't make him any less dangerous. Everybody out, Steele said quietly. Rex and Miles hesitated, then obeyed, leaving Steele alone with Eli. The shed felt smaller with just the two of them inside, the silence nestling in the corners like another threat. Steele pulled up an old stool and sat in front of Eli, elbows resting on his knees. For a moment, he just looked at him, really looked. Where's your family, Eli? Steele asked. His voice was unexpectedly calm. Eli blinked. Of all the things he expected, that wasn't one of them. Don't have one, he said. Not anymore. What happened? Eli swallowed, his throat dry as dust. Dad died when I was 10. Mom couldn't keep it together after that. Foster homes, shelters, places that cared more about rules than people. I learned that the only person who wouldn't leave me behind was me. Steele studied his face, eyes searching for cracks. You know what happens when people mess with my family? I can guess, Eli muttered. Steele leaned forward. You pulled Amber out of that burning car. That buys you something. I don't know what yet. But understand this, if I find out you touched her, if I find out you sold her out to someone out there, I will turn this whole desert into your grave and still sleep fine at night. Eli met his gaze, anger and fear fighting inside his chest. Then find out who's really out there instead of wasting time on the only person who tried to help her. The door banged open before Steele could answer. One of the younger bikers, Chase stood in the doorway, breathing hard. "Boss, we just checked the outer ridge again. The tracks from that SUV. They don't lead away. They loop back around behind the compound and disappear in the dunes." "Disappear how?" Steele snapped. "Like they stopped and unloaded something. Or someone." Eli felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Unloaded someone." Steele stood, the stool scraping against the concrete. "Get the bikes ready," he ordered. "We're riding out. Chase, Miles, you're with me on the ridge. Rex." He turned to Eli. The anger in his eyes cooled into something sharper, more calculating. "Rex, unchain him." Rex stared. "You sure about that?" "He's coming with us," Steele said. "If he's lying, the desert will take care of the rest." The chain fell away from Eli's wrist, leaving angry red marks. He rubbed the skin, barely believing he wasn't still tied down. "You're coming," Steele told him, voice flat. "You were the last one to see her before she vanished. If you're innocent, you'll help us find her. If you're not," he let the sentence hang in the dusty air. Eli nodded once. "Good. Because sitting here while she's out there, wherever she is, that's worse than whatever you're planning." Minutes later, the compound roared to life. Riders strapped on helmets, checked weapons, and formed up in a line. The sun was climbing higher, painting the sand in harsh yellow and white. Eli climbed onto the back of a bike behind Rex, his stomach knotted, his mind racing. The wind tore at Eli's clothes as the bikes thundered across the sand, following the faint scars left by the SUV's tires. The farther they rode from the compound, the smaller it looked, until it was just a smudge behind them. Ahead, nothing but rocks, dry riverbeds, and dunes that seemed to shift every time he blinked. After nearly an hour, Steele raised his hand and the bikes slowed. They rolled to a stop near a cluster of jagged rocks that jutted out of the sand like broken teeth. The tracks they'd been following faded here, swallowed by the shifting dunes. "Spread out," Steele ordered. "Look for anything, tracks, fabric, shell casings, anything that doesn't belong." The riders fanned out, engines off, the desert suddenly too quiet. Eli climbed off the bike, legs shaky, and looked around. The silence pressed on his ears. His eyes scanned the ground, the rocks, the dips of sand between them. Something dark caught his attention near a small crevice in the rocks. He walked closer, heart pounding harder with each step. A strip of torn fabric. Dark, dusty, and familiar. He picked it up with trembling fingers. It was the same material as Amber's missing jacket. "Steele!" Eli shouted. "Over here." Steele strode over, Rex and Miles following. Eli held up the torn strip. Steele's jaw tightened. Rex looked toward the rocks. "There's more," Eli said quietly. "Down there." They stepped closer to the crevice. In the shadows, half hidden by sand, were scuffed marks on the rock, as if someone had been dragged. Deeper inside, the darkness thickened, swallowing the details. Miles lifted a flashlight from his vest, flicking it on. The beam cut into the crevice, landing on something that made all of them freeze. A smear of dried blood on the stone. A boot print. Not from biker boots. Heavier. Squarer. Military. Eli's chest tightened. Military boots. Just like the ones he'd seen in his nightmares of group homes being raided, caseworkers shouting, men in uniforms walking through like they owned every broken piece of his life. Steele's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Those aren't ours. Boss, Rex said, if these guys are feds or ex-military, this is bigger than a jacked shipment. Eli swallowed. What if they didn't just take your guns? He asked, voice quiet but steady. What if they took her, because she saw something she wasn't supposed to? Steele didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the dark crevice, the blood, the boot print that didn't belong. Back at the bikes, Chase's voice crackled over a handheld radio. Boss, we picked up something on the scanner. Encrypted chatter, close by. Sounds like they're talking about a package they moved before dawn. And they know about us. They mentioned bikers approaching the zone. The word package hung in the air like a curse. Steele's hands curled into fists. They're watching us, he muttered. Listening. Waiting. Rex looked around the open desert. We're exposed out here, he said. If they've got scopes, drones, anything, they see everything we're doing. Eli felt sweat trail down his spine, cold despite the heat. Then why aren't they stopping us? He asked. If they took her, why let us get this close? Steele turned toward him slowly. Maybe, he said, because we're going exactly where they want us. As if to answer him, a low hum began to vibrate through the air. At first, Eli thought it was another bike. Then it grew, higher and stranger, not an engine roar but something more mechanical, more distant. Rex squinted at the sky. You hear that? A small shape appeared above the horizon, moving fast and smooth, too steady for a bird, too silent for a plane. It cut across the harsh blue, reflecting the sun. Drone, Miles said tightly. That's a drone. The hum grew louder. The drone circled once above them, almost lazy, then banked away toward a stretch of dunes a few miles ahead. It hovered there, just long enough for everyone to see its position. Steele's face went dark. They're not hiding anymore, he said. They're leading. The riders exchanged uneasy looks. The idea that someone out there was pulling strings, watching them like pieces on a board, settled on the group like a weight. If you're still here with Eli in this desert, heart pounding like his, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Steele turned back to his men, jaw set. We head toward that dune line, he said. We follow the drone. If they want to play games, we'll show them what happens when you trap wolves in a cage. Rex hesitated. Boss, what if this is exactly what they want? We go in blind, they're waiting with rifles and scopes, we don't walk out. Steele glanced once more at the torn strip of Amber's jacket in Eli's hand. If my daughter's there, I don't care how many guns they've got. He swung onto his bike, engine roaring to life. One by one, the others followed. Eli climbed onto the back with Rex again, the weight of the fabric in his pocket feeling heavier than any chain. As the bike surged forward toward the distant dunes and the circling drone, something icy settled in his chest. He was riding straight toward people who had military boots, encrypted radios, and no problem kidnapping a biker president's daughter in the dark. And every instinct he had screamed that once they crossed into that zone, the radio mentioned, nothing about this ride would ever be the same again. Ahead, the drone dipped once, as if acknowledging their approach. And then vanished into the heat haze above the dunes, leaving only the growl of engines and the sense that somewhere, beyond the sand and the sun, someone was already waiting for them with their fingers on the trigger. The dunes ahead looked like waves frozen in mid-crash, rolling and jagged under the hard Nevada sun. Eli clung to the back of Rex's bike as the rogue souls roared toward the line of sand where the drone had disappeared. The wind slapped his face, hot and gritty, drying the sweat on his skin as fast as it formed. Every bump in the desert floor rattled through his bones, but the ache in his chest was worse than anything the road could do. Amber was somewhere beyond those dunes, or under them. Behind the growl of engines, a thought kept circling in his head like a vulture: someone had taken her and wanted them to follow. The jacket by the fence, the SUV on the ridge, the military boot print in the rocks, the drone hovering like an eye in the sky, it all felt too deliberate. A trap with bait they couldn't ignore. If stories like this grip you, and you're riding with Eli through this mess, hit like and subscribe so you never miss what happens next, and tell in the comments what you would do if you were in his place, going into the unknown like this. Steele led the pack, his bike cutting twin ruts through the sand. He didn't slow down until they reached the base of the tallest dune in the line, where the sand gave way to firmer ground littered with scattered rocks and scrub. He raised his hand, and the engines died one by one, leaving a silence so sudden it buzzed in Eli's ears. The quiet felt wrong. Too heavy. "We're close," Steele said, scanning the horizon. "Keep your eyes open. Anything looks off, you call it out. Nobody plays hero alone." Eli slid off the bike, boots sinking slightly into the sand. Heat radiated up from the ground, wrapping around his legs. He squinted, trying to pick out shapes from the endless tan and white. Nothing moved. No dust. No birds. Just the crackle of cooling engines and the distant hiss of wind over dunes. Chase lifted a small handheld scanner, its screen flickering with green lines. "Signal was strongest around here," he said. Then it cut. "But that drone wasn't flying for fun, someone wanted us to see it." Rex grunted. "Feels like walking into a punch with your hands tied." Eli's gaze drifted toward a patch of darker ground near the edge of the dune, where the sand looked disturbed, carved into odd, straight-edged patterns that didn't match the wind's usual work. He took a few steps toward it and froze. Hidden among the ripples were faint tire tracks, wide, deep, not from a bike. Beside them, partially filled with sand, was another boot print. Heavy. Squared. The same kind they'd seen at the crevice. "They were here," Eli said quietly. Steele joined him, looking down at the ground. His jaw tightened. "Keep moving," he told the others. "Slow. We don't bunch up. We don't give them a clean shot." They spread out, forming a loose line as they moved forward. The sun beat down from above, offering no cover. Eli's shirt stuck to his back with sweat. Every shifting shadow between rocks felt like it might stand up and start firing. As they crested the first dune, the landscape dropped away suddenly on the other side. Eli sucked in a breath. Nestled in the shallow basin below, half buried by sand like a forgotten scar, was a cluster of concrete and metal. Low walls. Broken fencing. Angled structures jutting from the ground at odd angles. Old warning signs, their yellow paint faded and curling, still clung to some of the posts. It wasn't just empty desert. It was a sight. "What is this place?" Chase whispered. "Old testing grounds," Steele said, voice darker now. "Government used to run drills and experiments out here, back when they cared about hiding things in the middle of nowhere." Eli stared down at the cracked concrete slabs and rusted steel doors built into the earth. "Used to," he repeated. "Doesn't look dead to me." He pointed. On one of the slabs, near a half-collapsed bunker entrance, fresh vehicle tracks cut sharp lines through the dust. And near them, a smear of darker color. Eli's stomach twisted as he recognized it: blood, still not fully baked into the concrete. Miles swore under his breath. Yeah. Someone's been busy. Steele's eyes scanned every doorway, every shadow, every broken line of wall. They brought her here, he said. It wasn't a question. They brought my daughter into one of those holes. Eli swallowed hard. And they left the drone to make sure we followed. Steele turned on him sharply. You want to turn back now? Eli shook his head. I'm just saying, we're not walking blind. We're walking into something someone planned. Steele's expression didn't soften, but he didn't bite back. You're not wrong, he said. Doesn't change a thing. We're going down there. They descended the dune in slow, careful steps, sand sliding around their boots. As they reached the basin floor, the air felt heavier, somehow thicker, like the ground was holding its breath. The remains of old structures loomed around them. Half-buried walls, bent fences, shattered glass. Bullet holes scarred the concrete in places, old and new layered over each other. Chase kept one eye on the scanner and one eye on the nearest doorway. Signals dead, he muttered. They turned everything off. No broadcast, no chatter. Either they bailed, or they're waiting. Eli couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on the back of his neck. Steele pointed at a wide, rectangular entrance built into the ground. A ramp leading down into shadow, framed by thick concrete walls and a rusted metal frame. Above it, faded letters were barely visible under layers of sand and time. Eli could just make out, U.S. testing facility, authorized personnel only. This one, Steele said. We start here. Splitting up? Rex asked. Steele shook his head. No. That's how horror movies start. We stay together until we know what we're dealing with. They approached the ramp. The air grew cooler with every step down, the light dimming. The smell changed too, less dust, more metal, stale air trapped underground. Eli's heartbeat thudded louder in his ears than their footsteps. At the base of the ramp, a heavy blast door stood partly open, just enough to slip through. Scratches marred the surface near the handle, like someone had forced it recently. Fresh, Miles said, running his fingers over the marks. They weren't subtle. Steele motioned them in. Guns ready. Eyes up. They slipped through the gap one by one, entering a wide corridor lit only by narrow beams of light leaking down from vents or cracks above. Dust motes drifted in the air like slow, lazy ghosts. Old signs clung to the walls, edges curling, Test Chamber A, Storage, Control Room. The floor bore scuff marks and footprints, some old, some newer. Eli's gaze snagged on something near the wall, a thin line of black melted into the concrete. Burn marks. He followed it with his eyes and saw more, small, circular scorch marks along the corridor walls, as if someone had fired weapons indoors not too long ago. This place was supposed to be forgotten. It wasn't. Chase's scanner buzzed faintly, struggling to pick up anything in the thick concrete. Getting interference, he muttered. Signals trash in here. Focus on your eyes and ears, Steele said. Tech's not saving us if things go sideways. They moved deeper. The corridor branched, then branched again. Steele chose a path that sloped slowly downward, deeper into the earth. Eli felt the weight of the facility pressing above them, layers of concrete and sand sealing them in. The further they went, the more recent the signs became, a crushed water bottle near a doorway, boot prints stamped into the dust, a fresh gouge on the wall where something heavy had brushed by. Then they saw it. At the next junction, something small lay in the center of the floor. Amber's bracelet. Eli recognized it instantly, the thin leather band with a small metal charm she'd been fidgeting with by the fire the night before. He dropped to one knee and picked it up. It was warm from the stale air, but his fingers trembled as if it were ice. Steele stared at it, eyes darkening. "She was here," he said. His voice sounded rougher, dragged over broken glass. "She dropped it," Eli said. "Maybe on purpose." "Breadcrumbs," Rex added quietly. "Girl's smart." Steele closed his hand around the bracelet, just for a second, like he needed to feel its weight. Then he slipped it into his pocket and nodded down the corridor. "We keep going." The hallway ahead was narrower, lined with doors on either side. Some hung open, showing glimpses of small rooms with overturned tables and rusted equipment. A few doors were chained shut. Others had locks broken clean off. Eli's eyes skimmed each doorway, looking for anything that didn't belong. Movement, color, a flash of fabric. Nothing. Then, from somewhere deeper in the facility, a faint sound drifted toward them. A muffled cry. Every muscle in Eli's body went rigid. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Steele's head snapped up. The others froze, listening. The sound came again, weak, strangled, but unmistakable. A voice. Someone calling out. That was enough. Steele broke into a run, boots pounding against the concrete, the others tearing after him. Eli ran with them, lungs burning, heart slamming against his ribs. The corridor blurred at the edges as they raced toward the sound. They turned a corner and almost skidded to a stop. Ahead, the hallway ended at another heavy door, this one sealed tight with a reinforced lock and a keypad mounted beside it. The cry came again, clearer now. A girl's voice, begging, raw and hoarse. "Amber," Steele breathed. He holstered his gun and grabbed the handle, yanking with everything he had. The door didn't move. The lock held fast. Miles stepped up beside him, running a hand over the keypad. "Not getting through this clean," he said. "Keycode's changed. And that's not stock. Someone upgraded this thing." Steele's hands shook with barely contained fury. "Then we don't go clean." He turned to Rex. "Get the charges." Rex dropped his pack and dug inside, pulling out a small bag with thick, putty-like blocks and a detonator. He moved to the door, hands steady and precise. Eli backed away, throat tight, as Rex pressed the explosives around the lock and hinges. "Everyone back," Rex said. "Around the corner." They retreated, pressing into the walls as Rex joined them, thumb on the trigger. The air felt thick, heavy, buzzing with static. The voice from beyond the door cried out again, closer to a sob this time. Eli closed his eyes just long enough to see Amber's face in his mind, smeared with blood beside a burning car, hazel eyes full of confusion and fear. Rex exhaled slowly. Firing. He hit the switch. The explosion wasn't huge, but it was close enough to shake the corridor, a sharp, cracking boom that rattled Eli's teeth and sent dust and bits of concrete raining from the ceiling. Heat and pressure washed over them. Someone cursed. When the echo faded, Steele was already moving. He rounded the corner, smoke and dust swirling around him. The door hung crooked in its frame, lock blown out, metal warped. He kicked it with a roar, and it crashed inward. The room beyond was dim, lit only by a single flickering overhead light. Metal crates lined the walls, stacked with cold precision. Labels stamped on their sides warned of restricted contents, serial numbers, military codes. But none of that was what Eli saw first. In the center of the room, a metal chair sat bolted to the floor. Straps dangled from its arms. A camera mount pointed at it from the corner, empty now. And on the ground beside the chair, one of Amber's boots lay on its side, the laces still knotted. The room was empty. No Amber. No captors. Just the echo of her last cries still ringing in his ears. The empty chair felt worse than a body. Eli stared at the metal frame bolted to the floor, the straps hanging loose, the single boot lying beside it like someone had been torn out of the room mid-breath. The air still held a faint mix of sweat, fear, and something chemical that made his eyes sting. Amber had been here. She had screamed here. And now she was gone again. Steele stepped past him slowly, jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck jumped. He picked up the boot and turned it over in his hand, thumb brushing the scuffed leather. For a long moment, he didn't speak. The others watched in heavy silence, as if one wrong word might set the whole place on fire. "This isn't just a grab," Rex muttered, eyes moving over the crates lining the walls. "This is a statement." Eli forced himself to look away from the chair and focus. The crates were stacked 3 high, stamped with faded but still legible markings, U.S. property. Restricted. Some had newer labels slapped over the old ones, codes, numbers, symbols he didn't recognize. One crate sat open, its lid leaning against the wall. Inside, something metallic gleamed under a plastic cover. Whatever they were moving, Miles said, it wasn't just guns. Steele didn't answer. He set Amber's boot gently on the chair and walked to the open crate. Peeling back the plastic, he revealed a compact device nestled in foam, no bigger than a toolbox, wrapped in cables and warning stickers. The symbols on it weren't like anything Eli had ever seen on a street weapon. "Explosives?" Rex asked. Steele shook his head. "Worse. This is military-grade tech. Experimental. Black budget kind of thing." Eli's chest tightened. "That was your shipment?" Steele glared at him. "No. That's the problem. We were moving standard hardware, rifles, ammo, old toys compared to this. Someone swapped the playbook." "So who did?" Eli asked. "The same people who took your daughter." Steele's silence was answer enough. From somewhere outside the room, a metallic creak echoed through the facility. Everyone froze. The sound came again, a faint groan of steel shifting, or a door closing far away. "They know we're here," Chase whispered. Eli swallowed hard. "They always knew." Steele's gaze shifted to the ceiling, then back to the hallway. He nodded once. "We move. Now. This place is a maze. We stay too long in one room, we're dead." They slipped back into the corridor, weapons up, every footstep sounding too loud in Eli's ears. The air felt thicker now, charged, as if the facility itself was waiting to see who would make the first mistake. At the next junction, Steele paused, scanning both directions. Left sloped deeper underground, into heavier shadow. Right angled slightly upward, toward faint hints of lighter gray. He chose right. "This way," he said. If they moved her, they did it toward an exit, not deeper into the hole. They moved as one. Eli stayed near the middle, close enough to see Steele's shoulders and far enough back to avoid being the first in anyone's sights. His eyes searched every doorway for movement, every corner for a muzzle flash that might end this in one bad second. As they rounded another bend, a voice crackled in Chase's radio, distorted, half swallowed by static. Eyes on them, confirm biker presence, hold until. Chase yanked it down, thumb scrambling for the off switch. Steele snatched it from his hand and crushed it against the wall with a harsh curse. "They've been listening the whole time," Steele said. "Through our own channels." Eli's skin crawled. "They let us walk right in." "Yeah," Rex said tightly. "But why hasn't anyone pulled the trigger yet?" The answer came a few seconds later. They stepped into a wide chamber where the ceiling rose higher, the floor stained with old oil and new dust. Metal catwalks crisscrossed above, leading to dark observation windows and control booths. In the center of the room, a series of low pillars formed a rough circle, each one topped with some kind of sensor or device, dormant but intact. And on the far side of the room, silhouetted against the glow of a working emergency light, several figures stood waiting. They weren't bikers. They weren't dressed like any gang Eli had ever seen. Dark tactical gear. Helmets. Vests. Rifles held low but ready. Their faces were mostly shadowed, but he could see enough: hard lines, cold eyes, calm posture. Men who were used to walking into chaos and walking out. Between them, at the center, stood a man without a helmet. Short hair gone gray at the temples. Clean-shaven, no tattoos, posture straight as a ruler. He looked out of place in the dust and rust, more like he should be behind a desk than in a bunker. Still, when he smiled, it was the same kind of smile Eli had seen on men who thought they were holding all the cards. "Clayton Steele," the man called out, voice smooth and steady. "You really will go anywhere for your family, won't you?" Steele's gun was up in an instant, but he didn't fire. "If you've hurt my daughter, you don't leave this room breathing," he said. The man lifted his hand slightly, as if calming a crowd. "Relax. She's alive." He tilted his head. "For now." Eli's hands clenched at his sides. "Who are you?" Steele demanded. "Names don't matter," the man replied. "Positions do. You move product you barely understand. We move things no one is supposed to know exist." And lately, those lines crossed. He stepped forward, just enough for the light to catch his face more clearly. His eyes flicked briefly to Eli, then back to Steele. "We had a deal with your people," he continued. "You run coverage. You give us noise. Everything looks like biker business on paper. In exchange, certain cargo flows through your territory without incident." Steele's jaw worked. "We never agreed to kidnapping." The man's smile dimmed. "Your daughter made herself part of the equation when she followed the wrong convoy. She saw things she shouldn't have. You should have taught her better." Rex shifted his grip on his rifle. Miles' thumb brushed the safety of his. The air balanced on a knife edge. "Where is she?" Steele asked, voice dropping colder than the concrete. "She's safe. For now," the man repeated. "And she stays that way as long as we come to an understanding." Eli stepped forward before he could stop himself. "What kind of understanding?" The man's eyes found him again, lingering longer this time. "You must be the stray," he said. "The boy from the highway." Eli tensed. "You aren't part of the original equation," the man went on. "But you've become useful data." Steele's patience snapped. "I'm done talking circles. You don't set terms with my family while holding my kid like a bargaining chip." "That's exactly what I'm doing," the man replied calmly. "You're in no position to argue, Steele. Look around. Do you really believe you walked in here unseen? As if to punctuate his point, more figures appeared along the catwalks above. Rifles glinting faintly, silhouettes dropping into sight at staggered intervals. Red dots flickered briefly along the walls as scopes adjusted. Eli's heartbeat roared in his ears. They were surrounded. Any sudden move and this room would turn into a slaughterhouse. What do you want? Eli asked, forcing his voice to stay level. The man tilted his head, studying him like something under glass. Simple. We finish our work. We move our cargo. No interference. In return, the girl lives. Once the operation is complete, she goes free. No recordings. No leaks. Everyone pretends this was just a story about some lost biker kid and a ghost facility in the desert. And if we say no? Steele asked. The man's answer was flat. Then you walk out without her. If you manage to walk out at all. Silence stretched. Sweat trickled down Eli's back. He could feel Steele weighing every option, counting guns, angles, exits. There weren't many. Finally, Steele spoke. You think I'm going to trust you? You already did, the man said. That's why we're here. Something in Steele's eyes shifted, not surrender, but a cold calculation. He lowered his gun a fraction. You let her go, now, he said, and we'll talk. The man shook his head. She's leverage, not a party favor. You get her when the job is done. Eli stepped forward again, heat burning in his chest. You're using her as a shield, he said. You're hiding behind a girl half your size because you're scared your bosses will find out you messed up. One of the armed men shifted, but their leader held up a hand. He looked at Eli, really looked this time, something tightening behind his eyes. You've seen too much already, he said softly. It's always the nobodies who become problems. Eli stared back, refusing to drop his gaze. Then fix your problem. For a moment, no one moved. Then the man nodded, almost to himself. Fine, he said. We add a condition. He pointed at Eli. He comes with us. Steele stiffened. The hell he does. The man's expression didn't change. You want the girl back, you keep your men outside our perimeter while we finish extraction. The boy stays inside with us until it's done. Insurance. If you try something cute, he pays first. Then her. Eli felt the floor tilt beneath him. You want to trade me for her, he said quietly. Not a trade, the man corrected. A guarantee. Rex swore under his breath. Boss, this is. Steele cut him off with a raised hand, eyes never leaving the man in charge. The biker president was very still now, the kind of stillness Eli had seen before fights that left people bleeding. Why him? Steele asked. Because he's inconvenient, the man replied. A stray who keeps putting himself between our plans and your daughter's bad decisions. He doesn't exist on our paperwork. If something happens to him, nobody asks questions. And you think I'll just hand him over? Steele said. The man's gaze hardened. You already handed your routes, your manpower, your reputation. This is one more piece on the board. Decide which one matters more, some kid you met yesterday, or your daughter. The words hit harder than any punch. Eli felt them lodge in his gut. He glanced at Steele, searching his face for an answer before it came out of his mouth. Steele didn't look at him. He stared at the man across the room, the weight of years behind his eyes. Eli knew what the logical answer was. He wasn't blood. He wasn't Patch. He wasn't anything but a problem standing in someone else's war. And still, something inside him whispered that if he didn't step up now, Amber's screams would echo in his head for the rest of his life. He took a step forward. "I'll go." Rex grabbed his arm. "Kid, don't be stupid." Eli shook him off. His voice came out hoarse but steady. "If this is the only way she walks out, I'll go." Steele finally looked at him then. There was something like disbelief in his eyes, mixed with anger and something else Eli couldn't name. "You don't know what you're walking into," Steele said. Eli gave a humorless half-smile. "I didn't know what I was walking into when I pulled your daughter out of a burning Mustang either." Kind of a pattern. The man in charge watched this exchange with clinical interest. "Well," he said, "it seems the boy has more sense of scale than most of you." He nodded to the men beside him. Two of them moved forward, rifles angled but not yet raised, crossing the room in measured steps. Eli's heartbeat thundered in his ears, but his legs moved anyway. He walked toward them, every instinct screaming at him to turn and run, to fight, to do anything but this. As he passed Steele, the biker president spoke under his breath, low enough that only Eli could hear. "This isn't over." Eli didn't trust his voice to answer. He just nodded. "If you've stayed with Eli this far, walking into danger for someone who barely knows him, hit like and subscribe so you're there when the next chapter of this war in the desert begins." The men reached him and stopped. One gestured with his rifle. "This way." Eli glanced back one last time. Steele stood rigid, fists clenched, eyes burning. Rex and Miles looked like they were ready to tear the room apart but were pinned in place by all the rifles above. Every biker there looked like a coiled spring. Then Eli turned and walked with the armed men, crossing an invisible line in the center of the chamber. Behind him, Steele and the others stayed where they were, held back by the terms of a deal that tasted like poison. They led Eli toward a reinforced door on the opposite side of the room, its frame lined with heavy locks and keypads. One of the men entered a code. The door clicked, then slid open with a hiss of stale, cold air. Beyond it, a descending staircase vanished into darkness lit by sparse red emergency lights. "Down," the lead man said. Eli swallowed and obeyed. Each step echoed, the sound swallowed quickly by the depth of whatever waited below. The temperature dropped with every level. The walls here were smoother, newer, less scarred by time. This part of the facility hadn't been abandoned. It had been upgraded. At the bottom of the stairs, another corridor stretched ahead, this one cleaner, lined with heavy doors and observation windows. Behind some of the glass, dark shapes hinted at more equipment, more crates, more secrets. They stopped at a door with no window, only a keypad and a palm scanner. The lead man placed his hand on the pad, and the lock cycled open. The door swung inward. Inside, the room was small and bare, lit by harsh white LEDs. No chair. No crates. Just 4 solid walls, a camera in the corner, and a heavy drain set into the floor. "Get in," one of the men said. Eli hesitated on the threshold, feeling the weight of the facility above and the bikers somewhere far behind. He thought of Amber's bracelet, her jacket in the sand, her boot beside the chair. He thought of Steele's voice saying, "This isn't over." Then he stepped inside. The door shut with a final, echoing thud. Locks engaged with a series of mechanical clicks that sounded too much like a countdown. For a moment, there was only his breathing and the faint hum of whatever machinery fed this place power. Then a speaker crackled to life overhead. "You made the right choice, Eli," the familiar voice said, the man from the chamber. "History tends to forget boys like you. But today, you're in the middle of something much larger than yourself." Eli looked up at the camera, anger flaring through the fear. "If you're going to use me, at least tell me what for." The man chuckled softly. "You're here because you're expendable. And because someone needs to see what happens when lines get crossed." A low, distant rumble vibrated through the floor. Eli's balance shifted. Somewhere above, something large was moving. Doors sealing. Systems activating. "Your biker friends think this ends with a trade," the voice continued. "But this facility has more than one purpose. And your presence here? That's going to force a few hands, on their side and on mine." "What does that even mean?" Eli demanded. "You'll find out," the man said. "Soon. We're about to light a fuse that's been waiting years. And you, Eli Parker, get a front row seat." The speaker clicked off. The rumbling grew louder. Lights flickered once, twice, then steadied in an ominous red tint. Eli pressed his hand against the cold wall, trying to feel which direction the vibrations were strongest. It felt like the facility itself was waking up. Then, faintly, beneath the rumble, he heard something else. A voice. His heart lurched. He pressed his ear to the door. "Eli. Eli, are you there? Amber." Her voice was weak but unmistakable, bleeding through the concrete as if there was another room just beyond, separated by only a few feet and a lot of bad decisions. "Amber," he shouted, slamming his fist against the door. "I'm here." No answer. The rumbling swallowed his voice. Up above, in the wider chamber, engines roared to life as Steele and the rogue souls realized the facility itself had changed beneath their feet, doors sealing, alarms silent but active, exits no longer where they'd been minutes ago. Down below, in a locked room with no windows, Eli Parker stood with his hand on the wall, feeling the vibrations of something massive coming online. Somewhere between them, a system built for secrets began to shift its pieces into place. And as the desert sun burned on above the buried structure, the first quiet stage of a much bigger war finally started. With Eli and Amber trapped on the wrong side of the line, and no one knowing yet what will rise out of that desert when the dust finally clears.